Welcome to the Food Junkies podcast. Here, we aim to bring you the experience, strength, and hope of professionals working on the front lines in the field of food addiction. Our mission is to educate you, the listener, and increase overall awareness about food addiction as a recognized disorder. Here, we discuss all things recovery, exploring the many pathways people take towards abstinence in order to achieve a health-forward lifestyle. We hope to inspire you to thrive rather than just survive. So stay positive, make a change for yourself, and share your journey with others. And hopefully the message will spread. Hey, Food Junkies listeners, Clarissa here. And before we jump into today's episode, we wanted to share a quick update with our Food Junkies community. For the first time, we're going to be moving to a new release schedule with new episodes coming out every other week instead of every week. We will also be featuring still one recovery stories a month. We'll talk more about this decision in our next Clinicians Corner, but for now, we wanted to give you the heads up and most importantly, thank you. Your support over the years has meant the world to us, whether you've been listening since the beginning or you've recently just found the podcast. We're so grateful you're here. The good news is that this also gives everyone a chance to dive back into our archive. We've had the privilege of recording hundreds of conversations with incredible experts, clinicians, researchers, and people with lived experience. If you've missed a few episodes or there's one you've been meaning to revisit, now is the perfect time. Thank you for continuing to learn, grow, and recover alongside us. We truly appreciate this community, and we're excited to be bringing you meaningful conversations every other week. Our next episode will launch July 17th. Now let's get into today's episode.
Welcome to the Food Junkies podcast. My name is Dr. Vera Tarman, and I'm your co-host today along with Clarissa Kennedy. Today we are talking to Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson, who is a cognitive psychologist with an expertise in the psychology of eating and the founder and CEO of Bright Line Eating. Bright Line Eating is a global program for the abstinence-based recovery from ultra-processed food addiction and long-term weight management. Susan is an adjunct associate professor in brain and cognitive science at the University of Rochester. Of interest to us, Susan also published a 2025 Frontiers in Psychiatry study reporting 6-year outcomes from Bright Line Eating program, which found that an abstinence-based food addiction recovery approach can support clinically meaningful and long-term weight loss. Susan has also authored books, Bright Line Eating, ReZoom, On This Bright Day, and the official Bright Line Eating Cookbook, and her most recent book, Maintain. So let's talk about her study and her book, Maintain. Welcome, Susan.
Hey, Vera, it's great to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about your books? You started with Bright Line Eating and ReZoom when your most recent Maintain. Do they reflect your journey?
Yeah, I think they do reflect my journey. Bright Line Eating came about, I think, because I was in 12-step food addiction recovery, and I was also teaching a college course on the psychology of eating. So I was teaching my students about the neuroscience of food addiction before that field had really taken off, but there were enough studies. We knew at that point that food showed a lot of the same, ultra processed foods showed a lot of the same effects on the brain as drugs of abuse. And I certainly knew that from my own experience. I was a drug addict, hardcore as a teenager, crystal meth, crack cocaine, really intense drug addiction. And when I got clean and sober when I was 20, my food addiction took over from there and really felt worse in a lot of ways. It didn't destroy my life worse. I don't know that anything destroys a life as bad as daily crack cocaine smoking, but it was harder to quit. It really was harder to quit. So anyway, I was teaching this to my students and I was living recovery myself. And what I was experiencing was that the academic world didn't seem to have any clue that food addiction was underlying the obesity epidemic. There didn't seem to be any understanding about that. And in my morning meditation, I got what felt to me like a mandate to write the book, Bright Line Eating. And so I started to pursue that. And so that's where that book came from. And that's really where the whole Bright Line Eating movement came from. I didn't set out to start a program. I set out to create an email list so that I could grow a big enough following to attract an agent and a publisher for this book. And then when I started to grow this email list, people started to write me back and say, what do I do? How do I eat out? How do I feed my kids? What about stevia? They just had all these questions.
Yeah.
And I just tried to send them to 12-step programs. And actually, what happened was they refused by and large. They're like, no, that's not for me. I want you to teach me. I like the science part. Tell me more about my brain. And I realized that there was this gap in the world and I knew this already, that there's a huge percentage of people who just won't go to 12-step programs. It's not their thing. I'd experienced that in my course on the psychology of eating. Most of my students had food issues. Most of them struggled with, that's why they enrolled in this class on the psychology of eating. And I would tell them about 12-step food programs and none of them would go year after year. I think in 9 or 10 years of teaching that class, I literally had one or two students total out of hundreds of students
Hmm.
ever go to a 12-step meeting. And only one student ever went to a second meeting. So I had already experienced firsthand how there was going to need to be some other kind of offering out in the world to help the masses understand about abstinence from ultra processed foods, that 12-step programs weren't going to reach most people. So the Bright Line Eating book came out of that experience that I was having. And then, irony of ironies, after I published the Bright Line Eating book, even a little bit before I published it, I started struggling to abstain from sugar and flour myself. My travel schedule picked up. I had three little kids. They were 5 and 2. I have twins. When I first started Bright Line Eating, and my life just got so overwhelming. I couldn't even keep my own act together. And so I started struggling with my own bright lines as I was teaching other people to adhere to their bright lines. Now, to be fair, I wasn't bullshitting about that. I was honest about it. I was never pretending that I was all AJ squared away when I wasn't. But it was horrific. And I was staying right. I was sticking with my food plan probably 95% of the time. That 5% was painful and devastating. And also because I had to get on camera once a week to shoot a weekly vlog, the pressure to not gain weight
Oh boy.
was astronomical. It was one thing to say I'm struggling. It would be another thing to show up a week later and 10 pounds heavier on camera. And so because of that pressure, I got forced into this accelerated break resume cycle. My personal food addiction is so strong, and I attribute that mainly to the damage that methamphetamine did to my brain. Methamphetamine is a drug unlike any other. If you look at spikes of dopamine,
Yeah,
it's
it's
like
devastating.
10x. After methamphetamine, cocaine was like nothing. It was
Yeah.
like, are you kidding me? Let's get it on, people. This is not doing anything for me. And I was a crystal meth addict intensely for many years. So I attribute the intensity of my food addiction to that. So anyway, so I was in this break, and when I would break, it would be full on. I was going way back into the food, hard, hard. And then I would have to get it together because I couldn't gain any weight. And I did not revert to any compensatory measures. I didn't go back to bulimia, which I had been bulimic earlier in my life. Thank God I didn't go back to that. So I just kept getting bright again, like break, resume, break, resume, break, resume, break, resume. And I did that 10,000 times, or I don't know how many, in about a 3, 4 year period. And that learning got pushed into the book ReZoom.
Yeah.
I created a course called Reboot Resume, and then the book ReZoom came out of that. So definitely out of my own experience. And I hear from a lot of people that book is really helpful to them. In a way, yay, right? Okay. May I have done the pain for you. And then, yeah, then the book maintained. I've been maintaining a slender body now for 23 years, going from class 1 obesity to a size 4. And I've had the same clothes in my closet for same size clothes for 23 years. And what does it take to maintain that kind of steadiness? Now, as I've told you, my abstinence has not been perfect all that time, but I've been back abstinent again. And so I really just started thinking deeply. There's also some sort of experience that comes from coaching not just a few people, but thousands and thousands of people. To date, something like 115,000 people have gone through my online courses. And there's something about learning at that scale when you're helping people and hear either directly or through the grapevine what people are doing, thinking, experiencing, struggling with en masse like that, that you don't really get when you're working one-on-one with people in the trenches. It's different. It's different, right? But at scale, I started to realize how many people were resisting true liberation, true freedom, not consciously, but subconsciously. And I started to think about what are the deeper identity shifts that are needed to actually get free here, to really move beyond the food and the weight struggle. And that's what the book Maintain is about. It's about long-term maintenance, but it's also about the psychological shifts, which you can start on day one before you've even started your abstinence or your recovery or your weight loss or whatever, however you conceive of it. You can really engage with it as a maintenance journey as opposed to a quick fix diet mentality, short-term thing. And the book Maintain teaches you how to do that, which greatly increases your odds of being successful long term. Because nobody's really starting out thinking, well, I want another round on the diet yo-yo roller coaster, right? Nobody wants that, right? But we often start off with diet mentality that's going to actually produce exactly that.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned numbers. You tell us about your 6-year study. Specifically, you have Bright Line Eating program, but my understanding of that is there's various aspects to the Bright Line Eating.
Sure.
What did you actually study? And tell us about the part of the program that you studied.
Yeah, sure. So the core of our program is something we call boot camp, and we've revamped it. So the boot camp that we studied for the 6-year follow-up study was version one. We now have version two, but I guess the biggest difference for our purposes here is that version one was an 8-week program. It's now a 10-week program, but it's an online program for most people. Most people are investing about 497 US dollars to participate. And basically, we took a cohort of people who had done the boot camp in October of 2017, and we randomly reached out to them by email 6 years later in 2023 and said, hey, fill out this survey. Now, I'm sure you're not shocked to hear that they didn't all do that. However, we did get 267 responses, which ain't bad. So we took 267 responses and we analyzed those data. Now, those 267 people might have done any number of things in the ensuing 6 years. They may have stuck with Bright Line Eating and, as you said, done a lot of our other courses, or we have a continuity program that's like an annual membership. It's called Bright Lifers. So I believe 43% of them were current active Bright Lifers, but that means that most of them were not, right? Like over 50% of them were no longer Bright Lifers. A lot of them were still doing Bright Line Eating in some shape or form, but many of them were not. A fair number of them did Bright Line Eating for a nanosecond and stopped doing it altogether, but then got this email and said, I'll do that. All right, I'll fill out this survey.
Can I
So
find out how many emails and then how many responded back?
yeah, I have those numbers right here. I think we thought we would need some follow-up by telephone. It's actually, your question is not that simple. So let me just put on my I'm over 50 glasses here and say we sent out so there were 1,876 people who did that boot camp in
Okay.
October of 2017. And there were 524 of those people for whom we had phone numbers. So we zeroed in on those people first so we could follow up by telephone and text with them. Of those 524 people, 215 answered surveys immediately, 316 eventually. We did send one email to the other folks. No, only 100 of the other folks, or randomly selected 100, and we got 13 additional responses. So that ended up with 329 total responses, of whom we eliminated. So we eliminated some based on, in those 6 years ensuing, they'd done weight loss drugs or weight loss surgery. That
Ah,
eliminated them. Or they entered rando data that didn't make any sense. We eliminated that. So we eliminated a few, and then that ended up with us 267 qualified surveys that we analyzed.
could we say of that crowd that would be biased towards a positive success?
I would think so. I would absolutely imagine so. It's definitely a biased sample and definitely biased towards success, which is not great. And it's also not atypical. This is the
Absolutely.
pitfall of doing long-term
Yeah.
data collection is people don't answer emails, and the ones who do are more likely to be eager and interested for whatever reason,
Yeah.
right?
Okay, tell us the results. What were some findings?
Yeah, overall, the whopping finding was that there was a staggeringly positive and highly significant result that people who do Bright Line Eating and who stay Bright Line Eating members lose way more weight than people who don't, and that the weight loss was massively significant. Something like 72% of the entire sample were maintaining clinically significant weight loss, which
Like
is,
what? Give me an example.
oh, what percent weight loss?
Yeah.
So some were clinically significant weight loss is defined as greater than 5% of your starting weight. So 5% isn't 5 pounds.
To contrast that with the GLP-1 claim, but let's go with yours
Oh,
first.
I can answer that directly.
Yeah.
So for apples and apples, it's not quite apples and apples for many reasons, but to get as close as we can to directly comparing to GLP-1 claims. So if we look at Ozempic or Wegovy,
Yeah.
right, which is the same drug, it's semaglutide, right? They published a 4-year follow-up study that showed that of people who are still on the drug, they're maintaining a 10% weight loss, not 10 pounds, 10%.
Yeah.
So if they started at 200 pounds, they're maintaining a 20 pound weight loss,
Yeah.
right? That's at 4 years. So ours is at 6 years, 2 years out from that. And of people who are still doing it, still Bright Line Eating members, still really doing Bright Line Eating, 40% more. So 14% weight loss at 6 years out. So better results than Wegovy 6 years out.
Without the side effects.
Yeah, and without the side benefits, fewer heart events on GLP-1s and so forth. So yeah, GLP-1s are interesting. They're showing a lot of side effects and then also a lot of health benefits. I don't want to say they're vitamins, but they
Huh.
are showing some health benefits as well. They're an interesting class of medication.
You talked about weight loss, so 14% at 6 years. What about food noise, or what we would call in our field food cravings?
Yeah, so we didn't test for that. We didn't ask that. We have data showing at the end of the boot camp, food noise has gone down to almost nothing. Just by 8 weeks, which we assume that's from a significant amount of metabolic healing and brain healing of the dopamine receptors. We think a lot of that healing is happening in just the first 8 weeks.
Any other findings that were of significance or that surprised you?
I was shocked at the average overall weight loss maintenance was 14 and a half pounds in the whole sample. Now, again, a lot of these people did bright line eating hardly at all. They just tried it for a moment. And then what the data and that so that 14 and a half pounds translates to a 6.9% body weight loss.
Oh,
But
okay.
that 14 and a half pounds is averaged across everybody. What that shows is that learning about the addictiveness of sugar and flour to some degree inoculates you against weight gain and again, people are actually maintaining some weight. Just keep in mind, in the
Yeah.
general population, weight is going up, it's not going down. It pushes back against this notion that if you introduce people to an abstinence-based food plan, they're going to rebound. If they don't take to it, they're going to rebound and gain more weight. So no, actually they're going to benefit just from having that information that, look, these are the foods, all the foods made out of sugar and flour. These are the foods that you really got to watch out for. And there's benefit to eating 3 meals a day, not snacking all day long. There's benefit to having some structure and some discipline. Just those kind of cold, hard truths are going to sink in and help people be better off, even if they choose to go a different path. I thought
Yeah.
that was really interesting.
Yeah. Now, I got a bit confused. Just to go back for a second. You said it was 10% of weight loss for GLP-1s, and then it was 14 pounds or 14%?
14% of the ones who are doing it, it's 14%, which is probably 30 pounds, 35 pounds,
Good.
something like that,
Just
right?
like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. I really like your concept of just knowing is like an inoculation to stopping or retarding weight gain.
Curious, did you ever measure addiction symptoms like loss of control, craving, like anything that is actually food addiction related versus weight loss?
So in this study, because we hadn't gotten that information in 2017, and
Hmm.
this was a follow-up, we didn't. But we have other data showing that our sample, like the people who are attracted to Bright Line Eating, 64% of them test as highly significantly food addicted on the Y fast and things like that. So we have those data in our population, just not for this sample.
Okay, awesome.
So who were the people that did best?
So the people that did best were still Bright Line Eating members. They were really adhering to the program, not they were saying, yes, I still do Bright Line Eating, not kinda. And they did the morning accountability call, interestingly. So in the
Mm.
Bright Lifers membership, we have a 30-minute call that happens in the morning where people celebrate wins and just get on. And sometimes people raise their hand for coaching. There's always a Bright Line Eating coach there live to coach people. And we do what we call the accountability roll call, which is, have you written down your food for the day? Have you meditated in the last 24 hours? What's a win that you're celebrating? What are you grateful for? Just stuff like that. And it's really a moment where the community comes together, and people who attend at least some of those calls, interestingly, did significantly better.
Huh.
And
And
then another finding, go ahead.
yeah, for people who may not be familiar with the Bright Line principles, can you give a super basic, like
Yeah.
no
The four bright
snacking? Yeah.
lines, the four bright lines are no sugar, which we mean no artificial sweeteners too, no sweetened anything, but whole real fresh fruit is fine.
Yeah.
No flour, that means no flour of any kind. Eating only meals. That doesn't have to be 3 meals a day. For most people, it is. It could be 2 meals, 3 meals, 4 meals, 5 meals, but it's eating only meals, meaning not grazing or snacking willy-nilly.
Yeah.
And then bounding your quantities of food. Most people use a digital food scale to bound their quantities, but you don't have to. Like when you go out to eat, you can eyeball your quantities or whatever. Just use a one plate rule or something like that. So those are the four bright lines: sugar, flour, meals, and quantities. And that's the essence of the Bright Line Eating food plan.
Okay, so people who did well follow those four criteria. They did the morning call. Anything else?
They were more likely to be over 60 years old,
Wow. They'd had
interestingly.
enough, right? They'd had enough.
That's one way to look at it.
They
Yeah.
had enough or they had more time to
They had
focus
more
on
time.
Oh yeah,
themselves.
that's
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a part of it. I really do. And it's, as I experienced when my life got super lifey, it's hard to do this when you're in the throes of working full time and raising kids. And it is harder. The more turbocharged your life is, the harder it is. Because, yeah, stress can lead to things coming out sideways.
this might lead to the next question. Why would somebody loosen their bright line, which I would think is a danger?
Yeah, so many reasons, right? I think there's some well-motivated reasons. Some people come in and our program is designed, again, like I said earlier, my brain is highly food addicted, coming off of crystal meth and crack cocaine addiction. And I designed my program to ideally work for that kind of brain. Not everybody has that kind of brain. And so some people realize, oh, this is a little overkill for me. Maybe I can put cream in my coffee. Maybe I can have raisins or whatever. And just for the record, raisins are not whole, fresh, real fruit. We would have grapes, but not raisins. But some people realize, oh, I can loosen things a little bit, right? And then I think there's some less well motivated reasons, complacency or overconfidence bias. Once you're doing it and it's working, it's easy to think that you can fudge around the edges and do 98% of what you've been doing and get 98% of the results, or maybe even 100% of the results. And unfortunately, with addiction, this is one of the areas in life where small deviations do often lead to outsized
Yeah.
bad consequences, right? If you've been a 3 pack a day smoker in the past, one drag of a cigarette can have enormous consequences after you've been a non-smoker for 5 years,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, but there are many reasons why people loosen things up, and sometimes it goes well and sometimes it doesn't.
You took out the GLP-1 users. Do you work with people who are using GLP-1s, and how would you work with them?
Absolutely. We actually have GLP-1 coaching calls in Bright Line Eating twice a month, where myself and Marty Lerner and Dr. Mark Getting, all of us could go by the name doctor or whatever, but one out of three of us are medical doctors, and Marty and I are psychological doctors. But we all have a particular interest and fascination in GLP-1s and how they work with the brain, and in particular around food addiction. So people can come to those coaching calls and get their questions answered. We're not giving medical advice there. We're just coaching people on their Bright Line Eating journey. We also have people who are on GLP-1s and who do Bright Line Eating together who've started meetups in our community. These are like Zoom meetings, if you will, kind of like a little bit like 12-step meetings maybe, but they're just gatherings of peers who come together to
Yeah.
support each other. And we've got a couple of those going regularly, so weekly, those are happening. And I tend to think that GLP-1s are wild. They're wild. They're so powerful and so intense and fraught, and they work so differently for different people. Some people have awful side effects immediately and have to get off them right away. Some people get on them and it's like the heavens have come down and blessed them personally. And they say, okay, you can pry this Ozempic pen out of my cold, dead hands. I am never letting go of this medication and everything in between, right?
Yeah.
Everything in between. And I think that they are a really good adjunct tool to add to a food recovery program if somebody hasn't been able to find the relief or the results that they're seeking. For whatever reason, I will say I am very pro-choice on the medications. And I really want our food addiction recovery world to not pathologize them. I really think that being on medication when you have a brain-based disease, if there is a medication, if you're lucky enough to have a medication that treats your brain-based disease, is often a really good idea. I think that for people with bipolar disorder, I think that for people with schizophrenia, I think that for people with food addiction, I think that for people with obesity, these are brain-based diseases. And I really cringe when people suggest that if someone's getting on medication, they're taking an easier, softer way or not willing to do their work. I think that's judgy and short-sighted and potentially incredibly damaging. And I think that said, I don't think the meds are for everybody or should be that everybody should just go rush out and get on them. They have really powerful effects. And what we don't know yet is what happens to people's brains if they start off with a serious case of food addiction, go on the meds for a while, and then get off for whatever reason. What happens then, right? Are their cravings worse? That's what I'm predicting. I think they're likely to be worse.
Even worse than if they hadn't been on them at all.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
right.
that's an interesting thing. Chrissy, you had a study with Jen Unwin that was similar. Did you find similar results?
It was, but it wasn't because we didn't measure weight loss. We had to do BMI because people find that interesting. But ours was really about food addiction symptoms going down. Yes, clinically, we saw people did reduce their BMI, but their anxiety went down, depression went down, and their food addiction symptom score
Yeah.
went down. And so I am curious, as we are in the food addiction space, I get nervous about the importance we put on weight loss in this field because I can have clients doing very well and actually have addiction symptoms be very low, but they will never be in a size 4 body like Susan. Right. And so I get nervous that they listen to a podcast like this and they hear I'm not where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, so what would you say to that, Susan?
Yeah, I understand it. I think I have that same concern. Listening to me talk, you might not think that I have that concern. And in my defense, I guess what I'll say is that I started a weight loss program. That's actually what I was trying to do. I was looking at food addiction recovery and I was thinking like, oh, this could help solve the obesity pandemic. And these people who are trying to lose weight aren't realizing that on the sly here, they're actually
Food addiction.
subtly addicted.
Yeah.
So let's help educate them about that. And I started a weight loss program.
Yeah.
And then it just happened that, like I said, all these people who resist 12-step food addiction programs started coming to my program as a food addiction treatment program, but they also want to lose weight. And what breaks my heart is when people lose whatever amount of weight they lose and end up characterizing their entire journey as some form of failure because they don't hit whatever number or whatever size or whatever. And they're not focusing adequately, I don't think, on all the benefits they're gaining, right? So we do a lot of work in Bright Line Eating and trying to highlight those. We talk about non-scale victories,
Yeah.
NSVs, and we talk a lot about gratitude and about what is working. And I talk about the two gaps, right? The gap between where you're at now and where you think you ought to be. But let's look at the gap between where you are now and where you've been and how far you've come, right?
Yeah.
Really focus on that gap. So I agree, Clarissa. I wholeheartedly agree. And I don't know, I'm sensitive to certain psychological data like that anti-fat bias is the only one still going up, which is just heartbreaking. Bias based on race and gender and sexual orientation and all the other things has been going down and is going down steadily. And bias based on size is still going up.
Especially with Ozempic and what we're seeing in celebrities and this unnatural thinness that even people are presenting. It's like going back in time to with the Kate Moss bodies being idealized. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong. I also want to name there's nothing wrong with wanting to lose weight. There is so many health benefits for losing weight. I have many clients with knee issues. The release of weight is going to give them more life. And sometimes being in a larger body is absolutely not allowing them to live the life that they want. It's just like, how do we help both,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah,
person.
totally. Yeah,
The,
it's this weird double-edged sword with the medications. On
Yeah.
the one hand, they loosened our tongues. We couldn't even talk about weight loss. I wouldn't even be invited on so many podcasts. Still am not, because I'm talking about weight loss in the context of an abstinence-based food plan.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, diet mentality, you are canceled.
Yeah.
So I love that the medications are allowing us to talk about weight because it's not good for any of
Yeah.
us that
And
our weight just keeps going up.
I have clinically had clients who could not even get 1 day sober without being on the GLP-1s because they just were in survival all the time. And there was not, they couldn't even use the coping tools because the food noise was so loud. And then I've also had clients who have been able to maintain an abstinence-based program, but they have got to this body set point, and then maybe the GLP-1 has allowed them to continue the journey. There's definitely, it's so individual and it's so nuanced. I'm always protective of the listener who may be, because I have so many of them, who's, I'm in a larger body, I'm doing all the right things, and I'm not seeing the results because it's
Yeah.
not as simple as calories in, calories out.
uh,
It's not. And can I interject here? Because I just learned, and I don't know if you two are hip to this yet, but I just shot a vlog about this that'll come out this week about lipedema. I had no idea that 11% of female bodies are projected to have lipedema right now. And lipedema is fat tissue that won't even respond to
yeah.
dietary intervention. It's
Yeah.
just going to be stuck there. And so I didn't realize how many of my people in Bright Line Eating are probably experiencing weight loss plateaus or slow weight loss or what feels like frustrating non-results, even though they're following the food plan and they're looking around going, what am I doing wrong? Everybody else is losing weight. And they don't realize that their fat is not typical fat, it's lipedema fat. And they have to go on a whole different journey to figure that
Yeah.
out.
And I was curious, does your community have like a specific group that works with individuals in those categories who are maybe in larger bodies, but maybe not seeing the results? Or is that something that actually makes people drop out of bright line eating sometimes?
Yeah, I was going to ask about the dropout rate if you have one.
Yeah, so we have coaching calls all the time that where people can get support. And I do think that food addiction is a beast. Addiction is a beast. Food addiction is the worst. And in terms of our dropout rate, I think just over 50% of people complete boot camp who enroll in it. And then something about 55, 60% of people re-up their annual Bright Lifers membership year over year. So we do have a dropout rate and we also have a stick rate as well. And yeah, so yeah,
Okay.
those are our numbers.
I want to give you credit for the fact that you do talk about weight loss because that's in the medical world, that's all they care about. Bariatric surgery and bariatric medicine, it's about weight loss. It's not about the food noise, which is a secondary thing. So, what would you say to them with the research that you have to that whole community, medical community that is just interested in weight loss?
I would say that food addiction is a driver of obesity, and successful weight loss mechanisms are those that target food addiction.
Now let's get to your book, Maintain. Can you tell us about that? You have a number of features in that book, the identity shift, the grieving. Start with the essence of it.
Yeah, the essence of the book is that to maintain weight loss long term, you're going to need to undergo three key identity shifts. You're going to need to be someone new. Now, this is what everybody knows when they tell their neighbor or their friend or their sister or whatever, you can't just go on another diet, you have to change your lifestyle. But they don't think deeply about what that means. What does it actually mean to change your lifestyle? What it means is to change your identity deep down. Different people live differently, right? You have to be someone different to have a different lifestyle. And so the three identity shifts are you've got to become devoted, resourced, and liberated. Those are the three shifts. And probably when people say you can't diet, diets don't work, you have to change your lifestyle, what they mean is you have to be devoted, meaning you're not going to go on and off your plan. But think about what that means. It means you're not going to go off your plan on a cruise or on your birthday or on your spouse's birthday, your kid's birthday, right? And think about how ridiculous it would seem if you had a friend who was vegetarian, longtime vegetarian, and you went on a cruise with them and they ordered a ribeye steak. You'd be like, what are you doing? They'd be like, I'm on a cruise. I'm not going to be vegetarian today. They wouldn't do that, right? Because being vegetarian is deeper than that, right? So your way of eating that you adopt has to sink down to that level where this is what you do now. So that's being devoted. There's a couple of things about that. In order to successfully be devoted, you're going to have to pick a way of eating that is strong enough for your brain. If you've got a really strong food addiction on board, probably having samples of sugar and flour willy-nilly, not for sure, but probably isn't going to work for you, right? Or you're going to need a lot of support around that and try it out. But my guess is I predict you're going to eventually come around to some form of abstinence. Another thing you're going to want to think about is that it's not just a food plan. It's food, it's habits, it's support. It's not just one thing. You're going to need support around all of it. So think of your plan as multifaceted in those three ways. So that's the devoted angle. And then on what you mentioned, grieving, Vera, that comes into the devoted part. A lot of people have a hard time being devoted because they don't do their grief work. It's actually really hard and sad to let go of some of your favorite foods. That's not trivial. It's really hard and sad to lose some of the spontaneity.
Just for example, when I think about Christmas always meant to me particular foods, and to not have those foods at Christmas, it's like Christmas isn't the same. There is an actual loss. So I would imagine that other people,
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And I think people skip over that and don't really face that it's hard. And so when you're not willing to face that, you get stuck in diet mentality. The only way to reconcile it is that I'm just doing this for now,
yeah.
which is okay to do it for a little bit, but at some point to have it really sink in, you're going to have to do the grief work so that it's not just for now, it becomes who you are. And then once you're really eating differently, now you realize you have to develop new tools because eating over stuff isn't an option anymore. So now you have to learn how to deal with the stressors of life differently. And this is what I faced in those years, 2015 to 2018, 19. I had to learn new coping strategies because my life had gotten so full on that my old strategies weren't up to snuff anymore. So you've got to become well resourced, someone who
Yeah.
doesn't turn to food to get through life. So you're not eating over everything anymore. And in the book, I talk about micro tools and macro tools. So like daily tools and then like big, deeper work, trauma work, deeper psychological work that has to be done. And then the last one is so interesting. It's about being liberated, meaning being done with the food and the weight struggle and someone who's really moved on and filled their life with life, not thinking about the food and the weight anymore. And I want to tell a couple stories about being liberated. One is that I see so many people resist it. And they resist it in lots of ways. They resist it subtly. They don't know they're doing it, by the way. This is totally subconscious. They keep themselves hovering above whatever goal weight range they think is ideal by tweaking their plan, by eating out big, sexy restaurant meals, whatever, so that they always have a little bit of weight that they're thinking they need to lose. And by doing that, they keep the food and the weight struggle as alive as it ever was. They may have lost 100 pounds but they still have 5 to go in their mind. And they're still doing stuff because the food and the weight struggle is still part of who they are. They're resisting moving on.
That's the sabotaging that we talk about.
Yeah, I call that one finish line anxiety, where
Yeah.
they're
It
just,
is because then they have to face what is life actually without focusing on this all the time. Like, who am I? What do I like? What do I do for fun? Like, that's like an
exactly.
existential, like,
It's an existential crisis. It really
yeah.
is. And so here's the story I want to tell about this. When I would
Yeah.
teach that college course on the psychology of eating, I would at some point in the semester draw a big circle on the board. And I would say, this is a pie chart. And I want you to shade in the percentage of it that represents all the focus you'd spend on your food, your weight, your exercise. So this circle represents your entire life, everything you think, everything you do, everything you focus on, every thought you have, every action you take, all of it is in this circle. And I would have students start to cry and they'd think 95%. But most of them, and most of my people, the people who come to Bright Line Eating, absolutely at the beginning of their journey, they're north of 50%. This food, weight, exercise struggle has been more than 50% of their focus for decades. And then I ask people, we've got a percentage of people in Bright Line Eating who get it. They're dialed in. They work their program, they're joyous, they're not focused on food and weight anymore. And I asked them, what's your percentage? And it's 15%, 15, 20%. Still takes a little something to maintain to plan your food, to get to the grocery store. But I have them include in there their meditation practice, their Gideon Games team, their accountability call in the morning, all the things they're doing. It all fits in there. And they're like, yeah, 15%. So to Clarissa's point that she just made, that gap from, let's say, 55% down to 15%, okay, I would be thinking, amen and hallelujah. I just got back 40% of my prime real estate. Like, gimme, because I got life to live, baby, and I want that back, right? But that's not what they're thinking. They're thinking, oh no, who am I? It's not even a thinking, it's a feeling. It's like a gaping chasm of, does this mean I have to face that I don't really like my spouse? And that my adult child won't talk to me or come home for holidays, or that I never developed a career that I like or that feels fulfilling, or that I actually am terrified to look in the mirror at my eyes. These are the types of things that they're afraid. I don't even know if they're having those thoughts consciously, but that's what they're afraid is on the other side of actually putting the food down. And the reality is that anything that we have a lot of experience with, like that we have expertise in, is rewarding in its own way, even if it's terrible, right? Gaining a little weight, losing a little weight. Now that's familiar territory. We'll just go back to that, right? So I'll eat out for a little bit, I'll go on a little vacation, put on 5, 10 pounds. Now I'm back in territory I know how to work with, right? And now I have 10 pounds to lose.
It's like almost like gambling, right? Win some, lose some. It's like that same kind of addictive process, I think, in some ways for some people.
You know what I find interesting, Susan, I wouldn't have thought that concept of liberate would be so crucial, but when you think that some people are like definitely over 50%, maybe 90%, it is actually really important.
Yeah. I think informing people of it helps because then they can little by slow start to think, okay, what do I like? I do have some hobbies that I find enjoyable. I do have some friendships I could deepen and strengthen. And I was afraid that if I lost my weight, I would want to leave my husband. I was totally afraid of that. It totally turned out to not be the case. But I had these fears lurking that who will I be if I leave this problem in my rearview mirror?
You have worked with internal voices, internal family systems. Do you talk about that in Maintain, or is that mainly in Zoom? The manager, the firefighter, is that something?
Yeah. A tiny bit in Maintain. It's very strongly featured in ReZoom, which of
Yeah.
course I co-authored with Everett Considine, who's the
Yes.
world's expert in internal family systems for the style of eating that we do. He's brilliant at it, and he contributed to ReZoom hugely. So it's a little bit in Maintain, but not much.
Anything else in Maintain that you want to talk about?
I guess what I'll say is it's the first book of the five that I've written that really is written for a general audience, not a Bright Line Eating audience. And there I talk about how you need to be devoted to a plan. And then I give examples like that could be Weight Watchers and CrossFit. That's your combo, and that's what you do. Or that could be GLP-1 plus therapy. Or that could be like really, the book is very agnostic about what in particular you do. It's really about, in particular, the psychology of losing and then maintaining weight loss. It's really about that.
Do you advocate daily habits in Maintain?
Yeah, that's, I think, part and parcel of the whole second identity shift, which is being resourced, right? So, daily habits for the purpose of living resource, like a meditation practice, a gratitude practice, those sorts of things. So, the daily habit stacks are part of that second identity shift.
Can you give a commentary about willpower? What happens to willpower in this whole story?
Yeah. Willpower is a huge linchpin of Bright Line Eating. I teach people to assume that they're never going to have any willpower. That's the ideal, is to set yourself up so that you'll be successful without any willpower. And what I mean by that is if someone were to remove my willpower altogether, just take the anterior cingulate cortex and strip it out of my brain, I would still brush my teeth tonight. I'm executing that behavior without any will at all. I'm doing it with the basal ganglia, and it's a habit sequence that rolls off the assembly line with zero thought. I do it whether I'm tired, whether I'm sick, whether I'm traveling, whether I've been out late at a party. It doesn't matter. My teeth get brushed before I collapse into bed. Maybe you can relate. We don't have to have a sticky note on our mirror to remind us. It just happens, right? And you can actually set up more and more of your life so that the things that will support you in living the life you want to have, so that they get done that way. And I help people set up eating so that it gets done that way. That's what Bright Line Eating is all about. And this is why I don't recommend tracking macros or counting points or counting calories, because they don't, they would never automated the same way that teeth brushing is automated.
Well, give examples of how you would automate some of the habits that should be part of this second mindset.
Yeah, okay, sure. So when I roll out of bed, or just when anybody rolls out of bed, those first 1 to 2 to 3 hours are your prime real estate for automating habits, right? So
Okay.
you want to stack back to back and in the same order, right? So, for example, people have a habit stack for when they get into the shower. Typically, they have certain products that they use in a certain order, and they have a certain flow of how what they do before they get out of the shower. That's a habit stack. Shampooing the hair is a precursor to rinsing the hair. Rinsing the hair is the precursor to putting in the conditioner. Putting in the conditioner is a precursor to rinsing out the conditioner. Those actions are stacked in order intentionally. And so if you do them the same way every time, you don't have to worry about them getting done right. You want to set up your whole morning that way so that if you intend to be someone who meditates or who exercises or who eats a healthy breakfast or who writes a gratitude list, maybe you want to do that at night, whatever, that those things are getting done back to back to back. Just a simple example, I've been meditating for 30 minutes every morning for 23 years. I've been trying to do 15 minutes of Egoscue exercises every day for 3 years. I need them for my knees and my joint. I just have bad joints. I've been an epic failure at doing these Egoscue exercises. I just an unmitigated failure. I've been doing them so sporadically, it's painful, and I literally am in pain because of it. About 2 weeks ago, I just committed to doing my Egoscue exercises right after I finished my meditation. Now, that commitment was not enough, I'm sad to say, because I am not that committed a person. I might seem like a committed person, but this is all smoke and mirrors, folks. I had to create a stick contract so that the political party that I loathe would get $50 if I did not do my Egoscue exercises
Like
right after my morning
this
meditation
is like
all
the
7 days.
swear jar.
It's like that. And now I am someone who so far is Egoscuing faithfully after my morning meditation.
I don't
So
know what Nagoski means, but it sounds painful.
it's like physical therapy, whatever.
Okay.
Although it's super cool. You should look it up. But
All
anyway,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
It's like postural realignment stuff. Anyway, but yeah, so give me a little more time, another month or two or three, and I will get to the point where my Egoscue exercises happen as faithfully as brushing teeth. With
Right.
zero willpower involved, I will not need a stick contract.
So you're trying to make everything as automated as possible so that you don't have to decide, you just do it.
Yeah, not everything, but those things, right? And so that there can be a tremendous amount of spontaneity in the rest of life, but get those other things done. Because again, if you're trying to remember to brush your teeth at 3 in the afternoon, good luck. Your dental hygiene is going to be terrible. It's
Yeah.
got to be nailed in at a certain point in the day which is
Yeah.
morning and night, basically, when habits can be fixed into your routine.
Maintain is really talking about all of this. Somebody wants to follow up. What's been the response from the professional world towards your approach and towards Bright Line Eating and the research itself?
I will say that I'm getting lots of invitations to publish other things. I think that's because of the pay to play system that we now have, where papers cost money to get published.
Yeah.
And so journals now run around soliciting people to publish. I think that I think that we're still in the slow burn kind of dark ages around
With
this
the
stuff,
yeah,
is
with the
what I
clinical
really
world.
think.
I
Yeah,
have the same experience.
I think that it's neat that my work has infiltrated where it has. There's definitely places it's having impact. And I think that it's just interesting that what we're talking about here has still not quite broken all the way out into the mainstream.
I was just going to say, I love that. I feel like there's so much more flexibility within your program now, Susan, than I had clients that used to start and it was like one particular food plan and it was like done a certain way. And what I love about Brightline is it has evolved as the research has evolved and there's so much more. There's so many different food plans and people are doing things that work for them. And there's just so much more, I would say, flexibility within it. And I just think that, and psychological support as well with joy. And I just love really that even your book, ReZoom, was so validating because I think when we look at the recovery research, that is everybody's trajectory, right? Is it takes sometimes 6 or 7 years to get 1 year of abstinence and it's resuming that whole time. And if we can just normalize that, people won't give up and they won't be I'm a failure, I'm not doing it right. It's like this is actually how food addiction recovery works. And so this makes sense when this is happening and just keep going. So I'm just really grateful for everything that you've been doing in this space.
You are a bright star, Susan.
Oh, thank you.
What's next for you?
I am writing a book that I'm so excited about. It's an alternative memoir, which
Oh,
means it's little vignettes from my life followed by a scientific explanation. And it's all about the dopamine dominant brain.
ah,
So it's the first book that's not about food. Of course, there'll be vignettes about food for sure, but it's really about what's even deeper than that, which is how do some brains just get wired for more, not just more, but for control and for exploration and novelty. And if you have a brain that's dopamine dominant, how do you take care of it? Because the road is narrower and the ditch on both sides is pretty deep. And it takes a lot of care to thrive with a dopamine dominant brain. But these are the people who are changing the world as well, the people with
that's
dopamine dominant brains.
absolutely. I love
So.
that the ditches are deep, but we are running the show. Okay,
Yes, we are.
good.
Yes, we
Uh,
are.
okay, our signature question. If you could tell a younger version of yourself something about your most recent learnings, what would it be? Or even an earlier Susan on her journey?
I'm a big fan of my journey exactly as it has unfolded, so I wouldn't change a thing. I might whisper, keep going, girlfriend, you're doing great. But it wouldn't even be needed. It's just all been just fine. I have no desire to change anything about what I was doing back then because it all needed to happen exactly the way it did. So I live with no regrets and no desire to mess with the past.
I think that's a great answer, a great inspirational answer. Thank you so much, Susan, for coming on there to talk to us.
Thank you so much. Wonderful conversation, Vera and Clarissa, and I love your work in the world. Thank you for doing all you do.
Thanks for joining us this week on Food Junkies Recovery from Food Addiction. Make sure to join our Facebook group, Sugar Free for Life Support Group. I'm Sweet Enough. Molly and Clarissa are food addiction professionals who offer one-to-one counseling and group coaching through Sweet Sobriety. Please subscribe to our show so you never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in today's episode, we'd appreciate you leaving us a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps grow our show and allows us to reach others who need to hear this message of recovery. Don't forget to pick up a copy of Dr. Tarman's book, Food Junkies. And as Vera always says, the power is ours.